It's Wednesday, December 16th. Time for the Week 15 preview. We're going to do a rookie report. All right, welcome to the Fantasy Finish Line podcast. I am Jason Evans, joined as always by David Biggs. David, it's good to be here with you once again. And we are joined tonight with very special guest, Glen Dahlem. Glen.
Hello, John.
Cheers, buddy. Thank you so much.
Oh, I see I'm on the wrong wavelength. Right over my laptop. I appreciate it.
We're just going to
all over the
do a little
laptops.
shooter here. little closer, Jess.
Cheers out there to everyone.
There we go.
To Week 15.
Week 15.
If it's not on camera,
Hopefully
it doesn't happen.
You're still in the playoffs.
Okay, a little bit of chaos to start the show, but that's the kind of vibe we're going for tonight, everyone. Right now, we're having a few beers. We just had a little bit of the Tullamore Dew, as you can see over on stage right. There is a beer that we are drinking, the little Death Star, and it is a fantastic, is it Imperial Stout? Is it?
I think it's a Russian Imperial, yeah.
Russian Imperial Stout.
Yeah.
It tastes like, concentrated goodness.
Yeah.
Not everyone would say that about it. I think we have refined palates that Death Star tastes like goodness.
That's fine.
We've worked a long time towards this goal.
I'm going to rinse out my glass because this just leaves a residue that is going to make every other beer taste like this.
Yeah, but it's a very good one, and we have a lot of good beers lined up for this evening that we'll chat about if we remember as we pour them out.
So going by the video, starting from stage right, we have the Nerd is the Word, which is a sour from Pollyanna, which we have had here on the show before. Next to that is, I believe, Day Old Donut from Scorched Earth. And then over here we have a beer from Off Color Brewing. It is Dino S'mores. Dino S'mores, I don't think we've had it on the show before. I know that we've all had it together.
Yes.
It's a great one. And perhaps we will start with not a stout. Nope, it's a stout. Milk Stachio. A milk stout with cacao nibs and natural pistachio flavor. So I'm going to crack this one open. Don't feel... I'll make sure I save some for you guys, although Glenn is moving right along.
Compliments of Glenn.
I like your enthusiasm here, Glenn.
I like good beer, so let's drink some good beer.
Good beer is good to have.
And what's on the docket for the show tonight, Jay?
Okay, so I did tell everyone that there's going to be a rookie report, and you may be a true fan of Drink 5, and you're saying, if it's a rookie report, that's Glenn, that's not Shawn. What's going on here? But in fact, tonight we will be joined by our rookie expert, Shawn Foss.
You mean the other way around? No, you're right.
Well,
Where
right.
is Shawn?
He'll be joining us because he is not here in the studio.
Yeah.
He is off somewhere in the tubes known as the internet. So perhaps, Dave, we could bring Shawn along and say hi to him.
Yeah, let me shed some light on that and bring Shawn right in. He should be in the corner of the screen now. Hi, Shawn. Say hi.
Hey, everybody. How are you guys doing there tonight?
All right, Shawn. Thanks for joining us, buddy. So if you guys are new to Drink 5, then you need to know that Shawn is the man who knows everything about the rookies. He posts a rookie report every week. He is the end-all, be-all of any knowledge you need for NFL rookies. Tonight he's going to give us his top 10 rookies, rookie plays for Week 15, right?
And
Yeah.
since
Excellent.
we were just discussing the beers that we have here, you're no slouch over there. What are you drinking currently?
So tonight I got something a little special. I've got Goose Island Bourbon County brand wheat wine ale. It is right around 15 or 16% alcohol, which I did not know before I opened it. So it'll be an interesting evening.
So maybe
But
just one beer tonight.
It's some high-end stuff from Goose Island.
Oh,
Very
that's
nice.
funny.
Very nice.
That's the good stuff right there.
So we're all going to be enjoying ourselves throughout this this podcast for sure.
So we can go ahead and dive into the rookie. I think that we flipped a coin before the show and decided that we're going to start at number 10. So why don't you go from 10 to 1 and let us know what your rookie plays are this week. Just, give us a minute to sort of chime in and let us deposit our pennies, 5 cents. I don't know what the. I'm losing my metaphors here.
Change. We're gonna give him some change.
I'm gonna have another drink and let Shawn talk.
Well, sure. So before I dive into the top 10, I want to mention, so the top 10 for this week is all running backs and receivers. So I want to at least kind of mention what to look for from the quarterbacks this week too, but none of them are in the top 10 because let's face it, if you're in a super flex league, they're probably 1, 2, and 3 on the top 10. If you're not in a super flex league, it's kind of hard to figure out what you're doing, where you compare them against a running back or receiver. So just to kind of explain them. So obviously there's 3 starting rookie quarterbacks, right? You got Justin Herbert, you've got Jalen Hurts, and you've got Tua Tagovailoa. The one that I think is the safest for this week would be Justin Herbert against the Raiders. We've already seen him play that opponent once, and he put up somewhere in the ballpark of, I think, 325 yards and a couple touchdowns, and I think somewhere around 20 or 25 rushing yards. The Raiders are not a good defense. We've all seen that,
to put it kindly,
several weeks. But they haven't been giving up blow-up games to quarterbacks. They've given up exactly 2 passing touchdowns for 4 straight games now.
Yeah, they are currently 10th most in fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Right. They're giving up medium games to everybody. So I concur with you in the sort of second quarterback. Really solid start there.
Right. I'd see him as I see Herbert as a low end QB1 this week. Just he's got, you're not going to sit him or not going to play him over a Mahomes or a Watson or an elite high end QB1. But he's a guy who you can trust if you have to play him, you shouldn't be worried about that. I think he's also kind of due for a big game.
Ooh, I hate that word, due.
Yeah, Dave hates
that's really scary.
It's like nails on a chalkboard to Dave.
Fair enough.
Would you, I may be spoiling something later, would you start him over Josh Allen?
No.
Okay.
No, certainly not this week, as Denver is still missing their top 3 corners and had 2 other guys get hurt at the position last week.
Yeah, not a whole lot of people to start over him.
Okay,
right?
that explains a lot.
Yeah, AJ Bouye is suspended, and then the next 2 guys both are out. One is on IR, and the other one is expected to be back maybe for week 16.
We were just chatting before the show about Josh Allen being a top play and a top matchup for this particular week, which wouldn't always be the case against Denver, but it is this particular week. So thanks for spelling that out for us.
Yeah. So I said Herbert is the top rookie QB this week. Number 2, I would actually take Jalen Hurts ahead of Tua this week.
Oh my gosh.
He doesn't get a great matchup against Arizona. I think the Cardinals. Let me make sure here. They give up. I forget the exact rank, but they're I think in the top 12 at limiting quarterback points.
So they're the 13th fewest. You're nearly there.
Okay, so 13th fewest, but. In addition to giving up the 13th fewest points, they also have given up. They also have given up the 6th most QB rushing yards on the season, and Hurts ran for over 100 yards in his first start. Right. So if you think about it, Hurts did not have a great passing game in his debut. He threw for somewhere around 160 yards and 1 touchdown, and he lost a fumble. He was still the QB 10 for the week because of his rushing yards.
Rushing yards, yeah.
And he's going to have a great opportunity to have a big rushing game again. The Cardinals are as tough a pass defense, I should say, as the Saints. But I still see him as kind of a high-end QB2 for 2 quarterback leagues or super flex leagues. Just because of that rushing ability. He's probably not going to run for 100 again, but his legs, he's probably going to get 70 or 80 on the ground.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, I mean, that rushing performance was very impressive. It's only the second time that a quarterback has rushed for more than 100 yards in their very first game. Who was the first one? It's an easy one, Glenn. Come on.
Mike Vick?
Lamar Miller.
Lamar Miller, really?
Yeah. The only 2 quarterbacks to have rushed for 100 yards in their first game.
Did you say Lamar Miller?
You mean Lamar Jackson?
I'm going to have another drink. And,
Lamar Jackson.
He's on a...
Accept my penalty.
I thought it would be Michael Vick, honestly.
He's on a dark path. He's on a dark path, Jason.
Oh, boy.
And Glenn was like, okay, I guess maybe Lamar Miller played a game of quarterback.
Yeah, I was like, what? Yeah, Lamar Jackson? No, that makes sense.
So
listen to me, Mr. Smarty Pants.
So just to touch on the last quarterback, Tua, he's playing against the Patriots this week, and the Patriots have given up some some pretty low scores to quarterbacks in recent weeks. Since their bye, they're averaging giving up, I think, 15 points per game to the quarterback over 9 games.
Yeah.
But they've held 4 different quarterbacks to 0 touchdowns and less than 10 points in that stretch, including Justin Herbert, who had his worst game as a pro against New England. And they've given up the 3rd fewest quarterback points per game on the season.
Yeah, that was a doozy of a game too, Sean.
And we don't even know if Devontae Parker is going to play this week. The Dolphins are pretty limited in terms of their weapons. The Patriots, the best way to attack them is on the ground. If Gaskin or Salvon Ahmed play, those guys should be in play to have a decent day and hopefully limit Tua from having to throw the ball 40 plus times a game like he has the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I don't think Tua's strength right now comes from throwing the ball all over the place.
No.
That has not.
I mean, he had a good day last week doing it, but he I don't think New England would give up the kind of game that he had last week against Kansas City.
All right, so who's your number 10 guy in the rookie wide receiver?
All right.
List?
So this we're talking running back or receiver. So I mean they're going to be kind of intermixed in these 10. But number 10 for me this week is CeeDee Lamb from Dallas. He's not a guy who's got a huge ceiling with Andy Dalton at quarterback. I mean, we've seen that pretty consistently since Dalton took over. But his floor has been pretty consistent. He's put up over 40 yards most games with Dalton. And this week, he definitely gets the best individual matchup of the Cowboys receivers. He spends about 85% of his snaps in the slot, which means he's going to avoid Richard Sherman. And he's going to avoid Jason Verrett, who are the 2 best defensive backs on the 49ers. He'll match up mostly with Dante Jackson. And Jackson has given up a QB rating of 104 on throws that go into his coverage. It could be a great spot for Lamb to kind of get on track and kind of do a little better than that 4 catches, 40 yards kind of floor area that he's been in most weeks with Dalton. So I think he's got some upside this week.
Okay. CD has had a couple of rough games, and you kind of went over why that was the case. Washington, Baltimore, and Cincinnati only allowed him 4, 7, and 7 fantasy point performances. But I can totally see where he has the opportunities. So we'll see how that goes. You're not at all worried about last week's performance. They only had two targets in that game.
They won 30-7. When have they been in the situation where they've been in positive game script the whole game?
Hey, fair enough.
It's not going to happen against the 49ers, who at least have a competent enough offense.
Yeah.
That they're going to be able to either make it a close game or win easily. And so Dallas is going to have to throw the ball more. I'm not that concerned about the 2 targets last week. It's rare to expect Dallas to win in a rout with how bad their defense is. And again, Andy Dalton at quarterback.
Okay. So who's number 9?
So number 9 this week is a little bit of a surprise. Not a guy many people are real aware of at this point. It's Lynn Bowden Jr.
Oh, yeah.
Miami Dolphins slot wide receiver. He has running back eligibility. In most fantasy sites, you can play him as a running back.
But he's their slot wide receiver, so.
Yeah. But he is their slot wide receiver. He's a guy who, didn't play a lot after the Dolphins originally traded for him. He went on the COVID list for a week, and it looked like Malcolm Perry, the other versatile rookie receiver they had, was going to be kind of the guy that was going to step into that slot role. And then Perry didn't really produce for the couple weeks he got the opportunities. Bowden has played a lot more snaps there in the last 2 weeks, and you saw last week he topped 80 yards. And they're still going to be pretty devoid of weapons this week. Bowden's going to be a guy they look to. And the Patriots allow the 3rd most yards per target on throws to slot wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something to be aware of. I expect him to have a solid game, probably in the same ballpark of where he finished last week.
Okay. I have a dynasty squad where I drafted Bowden and still held him for the whole time because I thought that there was still something there. But like you said, I think the most important thing is that they don't have the other playmakers going. So why not bring a guy like that out that's multifaceted? And if he has dual eligibility, then that's great for some teams that maybe are in deep leagues, or maybe you have injury problems on your roster and you slot that guy into a running back position, and he can give you in a PPR league 10, 12, 20 points depending on how many passes he gets in the slot. Because how many receptions did he have last game?
I think it was 6 or 7. I know he hit 80 yards. I I don't have the number of catches handy. I can pull it up pretty quickly.
You said
here.
10?
I believe it was 10. I picked him up in the Drink 5 league this week. He had 9 for 7. 9 targets, 7 catches, 82 yards. Another rush for 2 yards. And 1 passing attempt. So he's getting the ball all over the field.
Yeah, he's sort of an everything kind of player, and there's not too many of them that come across that, especially at the dual eligibility position. So
yeah, I actually, I'm sort of sketchy at running back on that league, and so I just grabbed him. If somebody has COVID in the middle of the week, I can throw him in running back.
Or maybe throw him in there anyway if you're in a PPR league.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I've got Jonathan Taylor.
Well, you're not playing him over Jonathan Taylor.
Screw up every's name, not on purpose tonight.
And it's
more funny
interesting
when I
because
do it on purpose.
You mentioned that those kind of players are rare, but the Dolphins have 2 of them. Lynn Bowden played a little bit of quarterback in college, along with wide receiver, running back. He played a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Malcolm Perry, the other guy who's the slot wide receiver who was playing there before Bowden kind of got in there and started producing, was a quarterback at Navy, or like a triple option quarterback. So they both have that kind of versatility that they can play a lot of different roles. It's weird to see those players. They're unique, but there's 2 of them on that team.
So what you're saying is, Sean, they don't have to worry about a Denver Broncos situation. They have like 18 quarterbacks on their team. They're going to be all right.
I mean, they would be better than Kendall Hinton throwing the football, I would assume.
100%.
Who you got at number 8?
So number 8 is a guy who's a little dicey this week, but I still think he's going to have a bigger game than he's had the last couple of weeks, and it's Chase Claypool from Pittsburgh. There's been a little bit of concern there because they've cut his snaps a little bit the last 2 weeks. As I'm sure you guys are well aware, it seems like he's played a little bit less against Buffalo and against Washington. But you look at the result that they're 0-2 in those 2 games, and I think they start to get Claypool back on the field a little bit more. And in the spot that he would play is going to be kind of the same place where James Washington's playing on the outside. And his matchup would be against Darius Phillips, who is about 5'10", and Claypool is 6'4". I think he's going to get at least 1 touchdown in this game. And if they get in close to the red zone, they're going to find him on a fade or something with a 6-inch height advantage. He's going to get a touchdown on Phillips at some point in the game.
Yeah.
I do think he gets back into kind of the 7 to 8 target range and off of this 3 or 4 that he's seen the last couple of weeks.
To mention about the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have had a huge problem with drops with every other wide receiver, and I don't think Claypool has had those issues. Has he this year?
Not to the same degree that I think Deontay Johnson and Eric Ebron are the 2 most guilty.
Tell me about it, Sean. Tell me about it.
Yes.
From what I've seen, and I mean Ebron makes some crazy plays, but man, he makes some
Makes a lot of drops.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
I think as a Steelers fan, I think what we can point at as being a problem, especially over the last couple of weeks, but even beyond that, really is offensive run blocking and the running game in general. And then they're scheming.
I wasn't aware they had one.
They're scheming in the pass game, like you're mentioning, not wanting to necessarily use the players that should be used in those particular situations. So I agree with you. If they end up using Claypool more like they should, because he's quite a playmaker, and they're able to shore up the offensive line a little bit, Cincinnati's a good game to come back to.
Oh,
exactly.
100%.
So to answer your question, Glenn, he is at a 59.5 catch percentage this season, which I would say is average for a guy who's more of an outside down the field receiver. You're not going to get up in the 70s and 80s for those kind of guys.
Yep.
So it's pretty respectable for a rookie. And he is playing the Bengals. He had 10 targets in the first matchup against the Bengals. So, they like picking on that matchup clearly. I think that you're onto something there, Sean. He had 2 touchdowns in that game.
I was going to say he had a big touchdown game that game.
Yep.
Okay.
I also think he. I think I forget the exact stat. I think a couple of weeks ago when I had seen it, I think he had more than half of the targets or half of the catches that went for 30 or more yards. So he does get the downfield targets that you don't see for Juju and for Deontay. He is the guy. If they're going deep, it's usually to Claypool.
Excellent. Let's get through some more of these guys. So who's next on your list?
Sure. So the next one, the top 7, I really like all of them this week. But number 7 is Baltimore Ravens running back J.K. Dobbins. Dobbins would be higher if I trusted he would catch any passes. He may have 1 or 2 receptions, but this is a matchup where he should be fantastic. In the last 3 weeks, the Jaguars have given up at least 120 rushing yards and 20 or more fantasy points in half PPR scoring to the lead back that they faced. Granted, they faced 3 of the absolute best in the league in Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook, and Derrick Henry in those 3 games. But they've also struggled to stop, average running backs throughout the season. There's only 2 teams all year whose number 1 running back didn't reach at least 11 points in that half PPR scoring against them. And Dobbins has clearly kind of taken the front. He's the lead guy of the committee. They're still not going to completely hand it over to him and let him play 80% of the snaps like Jacksonville does with their running back. But he's clearly way out in front of Gus Edwards, and they've pretty much phased Mark Ingram out at this point. So Dobbins is going to get the majority of the carries. He's had double-digit carries in 5 out of the last 6 games, and a touchdown in each of the last 3. I like him to extend that to 6 out of 7 and 4 straight this week, and I think he's going to be a really strong play.
Yeah, and as you alluded to, Ingram is being phased out of that running game, and it's not that he can't run at all, but it's like, why would you not feature Dobbins, who's your Spitfire lightning running back? And that's exactly what they're doing, and that's what they should do.
And he's clearly been the most explosive guy that they've got in that backfield. I mean, Gus Edwards has looked good the last couple of weeks, but Dobbins is clearly the most explosive guy they have.
Yep. Who's next? And Glenn just cracked open another beer, and this one is Nerd. Nerd is the word? It's from Pollyanna Brewery in Roselle, and it is a sour with, do you remember the flavors? It's some kind of plum?
They use Nerds, like the candy.
With strawberry Concord grapes and lactose added, and it doesn't say in the can right now, but I'm sure they use Nerds in there.
Somewhere.
It's delicious.
Did you see something about the process where they're actually like pouring Nerds in there?
It's not like the Dale donuts where they're actually dumping boxes of Dale donuts into the thing. So it's more of a I think a name thing rather than perhaps actual Nerds being dumped in. But that would be fun. So Shawn, who is the next guy on your list there?
All right, so next we are going to venture back to another wide receiver here. This one is going to be Vikings wide receiver Justin Jefferson.
I love Jefferson this year.
Oh, what a great play.
So, but Jefferson, again, you mentioned what a great play. He's sitting at number 6 on my list this week. That tells you how many guys have pretty solid matchups this week.
Very strong plays this week, yeah.
Yeah, there's some good rookie options this week. So the Bears have been a pretty strong defense against receivers on the year. They give up the 3rd fewest points per game. And again, all this is in half PPR scoring.
Yeah.
But in their last 5 games, they've allowed 3 different receivers to top 100 yards. Jefferson, the first time around against the Bears, had 8 catches for 135 yards on 10 targets. And in the 2 games, they didn't give up a 100-yard receiver. One of them was against Green Bay, where the game was over before halftime. Green Bay ran him off the field. The other one was last week against Houston, where the Texans were without Will Fuller. They were without Brandon Cooks. They're without Randall Cobb. So they're down to their backup of backup wide receivers, and they're the other team that didn't get a guy to 100. Obviously it's possible that Thielen has a bigger game this time around than last time. But you have to trust the upside that we've seen with Jefferson and the consistent targets he's seen over the last month or so. And you have to expect him to be a solid, at least wide receiver 2 for your lineups this week. He should be a solid play again, even though the Bears seem like a tougher wide receiver defense.
Mm-hmm. I've loved watching Jefferson play this year. Dave has him ranked as number 10. By the way, if you guys are looking for some good rankings, make sure that you go to drinkfive.com. You can look at Dave's rankings exclusively. He is one of the experts listed on Fantasy Pros as well. So if you are on Fantasy Pros comparing experts, make sure you include him in your list because he's going to get you to the place you need to go. Twice this season, he has been the number 1 at wide receiver.
Well, I appreciate that. It's fun to see your name in lights sometimes. And I've been able to go because I use Fantasy Pros.
In this case, it's in tweets, but
I use Fantasy.
That's perhaps better.
I use Fantasy Pros myself. Even though I'm out there ranking every week.
You're not just the spokesman; you're also a client.
That's right. It's just like Bosley or whatever, some kind of hair replacement surgery.
Fantasy Pros, advice club for men.
I mean, probably a lot of those guys are doing the same thing, right? They're also going for hair replacement surgery. But I think it's a really fun thing to use Fantasy Pros in general. Even if you're not going to take their advice verbatim, it's fun to see guys from our site, drinkfive, as well as Sports Illustrated, CBS, Yahoo, all these well-known and respected websites, magazines, news channels, etc.
You've
that
really gone up the list this year, Dave.
that are talking about
You're making your way up there.
who it is that should play at each position, with all the matchups that are going on, etc. And yeah, so like when I look at wide receivers overall, I'm probably in the 20s now out of like 180 or 200 fantasy experts, and that's great. But you know what? There are still a lot of guys on that website that are more consistently accurate than I am, and that's why I go there and take their advice sometimes on plays as much as I put out my own. So I think it's a good community, and we don't get paid by them, but I love Fantasy Pros, so do check it out. Shawn, do you use Fantasy Pros at all for even looking at points against or anything like that?
So normally if I'm looking at Fantasy Pros, I like to look at the consensus rankings.
Sure.
That's normally what I go there for. And usually it's not so much about I like normally after I've done the rookie article for the week and kind of given my thoughts on them,
Yeah.
I'll kind of double check against and see where I'm at compared to everybody else.
You're like, is some guy way off, like an outlier that I missed something?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think usually I know if I have a rookie higher than where I think everyone else is going to have them for that week. But it's nice to kind of take a look and see if I said, hey, this guy's a borderline guy or a start guy, and everyone else has him at number 40 at his position, and then they have a big game. Obviously, you feel good about those kind of situations. But I do like to look and see where the consensus is on players because it gives you. I mean, if you don't know the consensus, it makes it hard to kind of find advantages where you may think someone may be high on someone or low on someone, especially when you're trying to do trades within fantasy leagues.
Yeah, good input. Let's move on to the next guy.
All right, so we're into the top 5. Number 5 is an interesting one. DeAndre Swift, running back from Detroit. The Lions are probably not going to have a great offensive week this week if Matt Stafford doesn't play, right? They're going to have Chase Daniel step in at quarterback. But that's not necessarily a bad thing for Swift. So the Titans for the year allow the 7th most running back points per game. But they also give up a healthy amount of receiving production. They've given up the 10th most receiving yards to running backs. And only Detroit themselves have given up more receiving touchdowns to running backs than the Titans have. Swift, there's a little concern after he had his concussion and the illness that followed it, that he might play a more limited role, but he was almost back to his normal full-time role last week against Green Bay, and he did find the end zone in that game. I think he's going to continue to play kind of the full-time role going forward, and the switch at quarterback might not be a bad thing for him. So Chase Daniel, in his career, has had 5 games that he started and another one that he threw 30 pass attempts where he came in relief of Mitch Trubisky as a Bear. In those 6 games, about a third of his pass attempts went to the running backs. For this season, Matt Stafford has targeted the running backs in only about 20% of his throws, and that's if you count gadget player Jamal Agnew as a running back. He's more technically a defensive back, but they've used him as a receiver, as a running back, in kind of different roles. If you count him as a running back, then it's at about 20% of Stafford's throws. Chase Daniel, again, targets the running backs on about a third of his throws. And really, there's no one even close to Swift in that backfield in terms of pass catching ability. For PPR leagues, I think Swift could have some huge upside this week in a matchup that, they're likely to lose. They're a 10-point underdog. But again, that could play in his favor if a lot of the targets are going his way.
Do you account the same thing with Chase Daniel with the Bears with a terrible offensive line where he had to throw the ball with no time going on? Is it the same thing in Detroit, or is Matt Stafford pressured, or is there a difference, or how would that change the aspect?
The Lions, I think, have kind of an average offensive line. It's not terrible. It's not good. Okay. I wouldn't put them in the top tier in the league. But I do think Daniel will be throwing to Swift a lot. He's going to be one of the best players in that offense, and he's a guy they should be featuring. I expect him to look his way. He also looks to slot receivers a lot. Danny Amendola could have a nice game there as well. I don't know that I would want to play Marvin Jones for Detroit this week, but I do think that their O-line, it'll keep him upright, but I still think he's going to have to get rid of the ball quickly enough that Swift is going to be very involved as a receiver.
Okay.
Number 4, let's do it.
Number 4 is a guy that you've probably started every week if you have him. It's James Robinson from the Jaguars.
There we go.
He's been just rock solid every week. And it's incredible because the Jaguars have 1 win on the season. So you keep waiting for these weeks where he's just going to do nothing because they don't run the ball because they're in a deep hole. Well, last week they were in a pretty deep hole, and Robinson had a down game by his standards, and he put up 12 fantasy points. That's a down game for James Robinson at this point. The Ravens have been able to be run on. Like, teams have had success running the ball against Baltimore. They've given up, at least 60 rushing yards to the opposing number 1 running back and 10 plus points to that lead running back in 5 straight games. The Jaguars haven't been blown out a lot this year, and Gardner Minshew coming back, I think, will give them at least a little bit of an offensive spark. And again, going back to kind of the targets to the running backs, Mike Glennon, it's not like there's going to be a drop-off in passing targets going his way. Mike Glennon was thrown to the running backs about 18% of his throws, and Minshew for the year is at about 20.5%. So a little bit higher even from Minshew, but don't look for his passing usage to drop off because of the quarterback change.
What do you think about James Robinson, Offensive Rookie of the Year?
This is not a fantasy-related question.
No, it is not.
I don't care.
But Jason's been hounding on it all week, so give us your thoughts. Sean.
I'm hounding somewhere else.
I think that he's probably been the most impressive rookie, especially when you compare against expectations going into the season.
Because he was an UDFA. He was an undrafted free agent.
An UDFA.
That's what they say in Minnesota, Jay.
I think he's obviously got a great chance at it. I think there's a dark horse for this award that's coming up on my list yet that I'll mention when I get to him. But I think that Robinson right now would have to be looked at as the front runner because none of the quarterbacks have been if Burrow hadn't gotten hurt, it was probably Joe Burrow.
Or if Herbert had continued to do as well as he was in the beginning part of the season, it would clearly be Herbert.
Well, he ran into us into a train, and they were called the New England Patriots.
Yeah, that's true.
The Belichick Express.
Bill Belichick taught you that you're a rookie quarterback.
He ran into the hoodie, as Troy was calling him in the chat room.
I think even with Herbert, he wasn't putting up as many yards as Burrow was. Burrow had, I think, a 400-yard game at one point and might have thrown for, he might have been in the ballpark of 4,500 to 4,800 yards if he had been healthy all year, and Herbert wasn't going to get near that. I think Herbert's had a big year, but I think Robinson, even if Herbert hadn't kind of gotten a little derailed by the Patriots, I'd still probably say Robinson was the front runner for that. I don't think Rookie of the Year really takes into account win-loss records of the team nearly as much. You can win that award on a bad team if you put up crooked numbers. And to come into the year as an undrafted rookie and do what Robinson is doing, it's hard not to recognize that and reward that,
Overall Rookie of the Year, not offensive, correct?
No, Offensive Rookie of the Year. Overall Rookie of the Year is your guy.
They're two separate awards.
Probably.
They're two separate awards there, Glenn.
I can't imagine Chase Young being anyone being ahead of Chase Young in the overall Rookie of the Year discussion.
All right. Well, let's move on from this because it's not really relevant to fantasy, but it's a fun discussion to have, and maybe you can bring that up, Sean, as you talk about the other rookies because you mentioned there was a dark horse candidate. But let's move on to the next guy.
So this next guy's not the dark horse candidate, but he is a guy who put on a clinic running the football last Thursday night. Cam Akers, running back from the Rams. He gets the Jets this week.
Nice.
Oh my gosh!
Don't get too excited just yet. So he's a good play. The Jets do give up running back points, but they do it on volume. They're not a team that is just getting gashed in the run game for big chunks of yards and long plays and big numbers. They are the worst pass defense in the NFL. That's what has killed them. They fall behind because they can't stop the pass. They actually rank fairly high. They're 8th in run defense DVOA on Football Outsider. So they can defend the run, But when you're behind by 3 touchdowns or more a lot of the time, teams are going to run. They're going to run the football, and Akers is the lead back right now. As long as he's able to punch in a touchdown, maybe 2 against this team, he's going to have a strong game. But something to keep in mind, the only running back who's actually scored more than 1 touchdown against them this year is Melvin Gordon. So the Jets haven't given up that huge ceiling game, but they consistently give up that it's a start-worthy, solid performance. So that's the kind of game to expect from Akers. He is as high of a floor as you're going to find in a lead running back this week, although the ceiling might not be there.
I think a lot of us, and I talk about fantasy experts and people that I play with in a bunch of the leagues that I'm in, and I'm in 7 this year, identified Akers as someone who was coming on the whole season, but the coach was just trying to bring him in slowly and not announce him as the starter, not bring him in to have all the touches, etc. And it seems like that's finally happened for him. So I'm happy for Akers, and I do think that he's one of those players at the end of the regular season to the beginning of the fantasy playoffs. This doesn't happen very often. That you can start and just continue starting every single game. Who was a player halfway through the season that was on the waiver wire on almost every league. So
I don't know if I agree that he's been coming on all season. He's a guy that coming into the year I expected to have a big role, but Darrell Henderson played at a high level in September and October. He was a guy that was playing well and holding off Akers because he was playing so well. I don't think it was a situation where Akers was just this close to starting. Henderson had to basically start scuffling for Akers to start playing more, and that's what happened. Akers in limited snaps made some big plays. Henderson struggled, and Akers started to get more and more work. I do think Akers is the more talented back. He's the guy who should be the lead back there. But I think that if Henderson had continued to play the way he played in September and October beyond that, I think we'd still be talking about Akers it's coming, but it's not there. You know what I mean?
I don't disagree with you. Sure, I hear a lot from beat reporters 100%. And stuff, and I'm taking some of that into consideration as well. But you're right. Like in the actual game script, and we talked about this through the season, Jason. There was a lot going on there in that running back room, and that's why I said for weeks and weeks that it was basically pointless at one point to even select anyone from that room because it wasn't going to work out for you. And it's not just Henderson, but there was a couple guys in rotation. But your point's well taken. Akers is the guy now. You agree with that?
Yes. Oh, I mean, going forward, he could have peak Todd Gurley type usage.
Yeah.
I think we've seen what if McVay commits to a running back as this is my lead guy, we've seen what kind of fantasy upside they have in peak Todd Gurley. I don't know that Akers has the kind of talent that peaked Todd Gurley, but that guy was special. But Akers is going to get a lot of usage if he continues to play the way he's playing.
Great. Let's move on to the next guy.
So number 2 is a fun one.
Let's fill up this guy's glass too.
Sorry. I thought that was for you. I apologize.
I had some. Dave needs a little bit more of that.
Okay. Dave.
So number 2 on my list is another wide receiver.
Not what's in your glass right now.
My top wide receiver for the week. It is San Francisco 49er Brandon Ayuk.
Really? This is an interesting play. I'd like to hear more.
So Brandon Ayuk and the 49ers are up against Dallas this week. I don't think that they're at a level where they're going to run Dallas off the field. Nick Mullins is not a very good quarterback. He's turned the ball over. The team has turned the ball over multiple times, several weeks in a row. I think it's 3 or 4 games in a row now that they've had more than 1 turnover in a game.
Mm-hmm.
It might even be a longer streak than that. But as you guys probably are aware, Dallas is one of the worst wide receiver defenses in the league. They allow the 5th most wide receiver points per game. And if you throw out Ayuk's week 1 or his first game as an NFL player, there have been 4 games since then that he has played with no Deebo Samuel on the field. One of them, I'm counting last week where Deebo got injured on his first touch and didn't play the rest of the game as one of those 4 games. In those 4 games, Ayuk has 48 targets and fantasy point totals of 18.6, 19.1, 16.2, and 16.9.
Yeah, he's killing it. And Deebo's not on the radar anymore. So
And 3 of those 4 games were against teams that are currently in the top 12 in the league at limiting wide receiver points.
Right.
So he has blown up against some of the better wide receiver defenses in the league every time Debo's been out. Now, granted, George Kittle hasn't played in those games either. I think one of those Kittle played in, and it was the game he got hurt against Seattle. So, and there is a slight chance Kittle plays this week. They designated him to return today to open that 3-week window. I don't think it's likely he plays on Sunday. If he does, it maybe knocks Ayuk down just a little bit. But against a bad wide receiver defense, expecting him to get 10 plus targets, he is the only downfield threat they have at receiver, and he's just been phenomenal the last few weeks. He's scoring a touchdown almost every week. At this point, I think you have to look at him as he's almost on par with Jefferson going forward. And he's the guy who I think, without Debo on the field, if he continues to play the way he's played over the next few weeks, he's the dark horse that could sneak into that offensive rookie of the year discussion.
You know what they say is that it's always the last impression that you make often when we're talking about sports, and not the first impression.
The strong finish.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that certainly could be the case. You're assuming a lot of him, but he's set up to succeed in a big way there.
One of those games.
Too.
Yeah.
The coach for that. Shanahan's always been one of those guys that throws the balls and throws the ball out there and makes sure that there's yardage to be had. But obviously, with injuries, it's been tough over there.
Well, there's just hardly any receivers, and you've got Jordan Reed and Ross Dwelly.
He's getting Deontay Johnson level target volume, and he can catch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an important factor.
You about
telling me how
much
Steelers fans.
Deontay Johnson dropping passes in my dynasty league is just killing me.
Hey, well, I think everyone knows Deontay's a good receiver. The problem is that you're not a great receiver if you can't catch the ball.
What do you think about him being essentially benched after 2 drops? Do you think Deontay this week?
He was not benched. He came back in. He had 4 catches.
He did not play the rest of the first half.
Yes, he was benched in the first half.
Yeah.
Well, Tomlin is a guy who doesn't take any shit.
So you said essentially after 2 drops, but it was 2 drops in that game.
Yeah, it's been games.
There were weeks
it was
of him dropping the ball, building up.
It
wasn't a one-time, he dropped 2 passes, he's benched. It's not like Zach Moss, who fumbled the one time and didn't play the rest of the game against San Francisco.
Look, as someone who had Deontay on his team in a fantasy matchup I wanted to win, I certainly didn't want him to be benched. But I get it from Tomlin's perspective too. These guys have to perform, or else why are they on the team? And so you gotta make an example of them sometimes. But I think Brandon is a great one. So where does that put us, Sean? What position was he in?
So he was number 2. And again, you mentioned that it's kind of a more recent thing, but one of those games that he had a blow-up game was week 3 or 4, where he had something like 8 targets, 70 yards, and a rushing touchdown. He had 3 rushing attempts in the game, too.
Oh,
so
yeah.
He had a big game early in the year without Debo as well.
You're right.
It was just recently.
Yep.
It was when they blew out the Giants. So who you got at number 1?
The Giants.
At number 1 is a guy we've seen have back-to-back blow-up games the last 2 weeks, and he gets to play one of the same teams he played against in the last 2 weeks. It's Jonathan Taylor, running back from the Colts. He gets to play Houston for the second time in the last 3 games. We saw what he did to the Las Vegas Raiders last week. The Texans are one of the worst run defenses we've seen in a long – they're certainly one of the worst in the league this year. If you look at the numbers, they're second in the league in rushing yards allowed. They're second in yards per attempt. They're tied for 4th in rushing touchdowns allowed on the year. They're, I think, 29th in run defense DVOA. And Taylor, a couple weeks ago when he played them, for some reason, the Colts didn't want to give him the ball until the 4th quarter when they had the lead. But he put up 70 rushing yards in the 4th quarter, and he also had a long receiving touchdown where he was just not covered at all.
Well, didn't he have a major fumble problem? I remember in the middle of the year.
I wouldn't refer to it as major,
but some things that made his coach get angry.
Well, rookie running back problems, sure.
Yes,
but it seems like he's graduated to the top of the pops lately.
Oh yeah,
I concur.
Number 1.
But Houston has a lot of problems. They're falling apart on multiple angles. They've lost players. Players are injured. Players are out on suspension. Their management is gone. So, what a good team to play against, right? I mean, look at the Bears. They had a fun time, and they're the Bears.
Yeah.
So just to dive into what Glenn just said, Jonathan Taylor's fumbled the ball once this season.
Oh, well then why did he lose favor?
I think he just wasn't.
He had a few weeks where he just kind of wasn't seeing the field well. It was like almost like a Trent Richardson-esque couple of games where he just wasn't seeing the
don't
field.
mention that name.
I know.
You're gonna scare every owner of Jonathan Taylor.
But he's overcome it. We've seen him look like the Jonathan Taylor we saw at Wisconsin the last couple of weeks. And I think that's going to carry forward. And I can't imagine that they go back to, all right, we're only going to use you in the fourth quarter to salt the game away after what he's done the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
He's been tremendous. The matchup is as good as it's going to get for a running back. And we've already seen him just destroy this team once a couple weeks ago. And I think he's going to do it again this week. He's the guy that, he's very much an RB1 this week. There's no reason you shouldn't be starting if he's on your roster.
This is great news for my team in Drink 5 and bad news for my opponent in Drink 5.
Let's again highlight Shawn's column. So the Rookie Report at drinkfive.com every week. For years now, it's also posted to Reddit, and I see a lot of people commenting on it over there as well.
There's always a good discussion there.
As well as the things that we bring up on our podcast on a weekly basis. And Shawn, thank you. So stick around for a little bit, Shawn, if you're okay with that, and we'll talk about some cool matchups. We don't have time to go over some deep league stuff, but I guarantee you that if you head to Drink 5 closer to when the games start, we'll have some more information on the website. And watch out for that Rookie Report. So I happen to mostly agree with you as I have over the past couple of years, because in the past, several years ago, when we first had you starting to do columns for the site, I would disagree with your column, and then the games would prove me wrong. So, so now I gotta give you the cred that you deserve, man. So cheers to you. And let's start with a couple of matchups. We'll start with one from Jason. If you want to just move forward with the first matchup that you have, we'll just talk about a couple of players to go in this particular game.
Sure. So the Bills are playing the Broncos, and the Broncos, the Bills have been riding high. They have 6 wins in their last 7 games. They beat the Steelers last week. They've won 3 in a row since the Hail Murray game that they lost in Arizona. And the Broncos are miserable. They have a 5-8 record, and they're kind of all over the map. They're beating some teams they shouldn't beat. They're losing to teams that maybe they should be more competitive against.
Can I just say that I oftentimes disagree with and actively dislike the nicknames that people come up with from ESPN or NFL Network or whatever. But Hail Murray's awesome.
All right. It's growing on me. I did not like it at first, but it's growing.
I give it an A-.
Matchup because of that Hail Murray. It was awesome. It was the most epic thing I've ever seen.
Good stuff. Go on.
The safety at the end of the Monday night game was some disagreement with that.
The most brutal thing.
That was ridiculous.
That's true.
So anyways, the matchups in this game are in favor of the Bills because they have a very strong offense. Broncos aren't too bad on defense, but as Shawn mentioned earlier, they have a lot of injury problems. So Josh Allen, I have him written down as a moderate start, but when considering all of the injury issues, I suppose I have to push him to a strong start because he has been playing very well. However, the Broncos have held all quarterbacks this season to below 24 fantasy points, including Hill, Mahomes, and Bridgewater in the last 3 weeks, who were under 21 points. Dave has him ranked at number 4 this week, and I can't imagine you sitting him unless, Dave, you said you had Aaron Rodgers as well?
Yes.
On a team with Josh Allen?
Yes. And what Shawn was saying, like you said, about the corners being out, et cetera, like it makes me think maybe I should start Josh Allen, but it would be a mistake this year to not start Aaron Rodgers in any matchup.
I think Rodgers has a piece of cake matchup too, right?
I don't think it's a tough one, but I don't remember who he's going against. Okay, so Aaron Rodgers is going up against Carolina, and he's my number 1 ranked quarterback.
Yes, if you're gonna do the rankings, I would go with the guy you ranked number 1 overall.
Yes, if I don't pick my own rankings on quarterbacks, then I can't be trusted, man.
my biggest thing on Rodgers, even starting in the beginning of the year, is they drafted another quarterback. And I know that as soon as they draft another quarterback, he was going to decide to play the best football he ever could because
Oh yeah,
nobody could ever replace him.
he already said on his own
Rookie of the year, Jordan Love.
Glenn.
Most important rookie of the year, Jordan Love.
Oh, yes.
By
He's saying-
making Aaron Rodgers an MVP.
Yes, that's true.
He wins the offensive rookie of the year without throwing a touchdown.
Yes.
Right. It was more important to get Jordan Love and motivate Aaron Rodgers than Brandon Ayuk, who could have come in and
Who would have
helped
made
in
them
right
like
away.
a one-loss team.
I can see if you got a good lawyer in there, he can make that case. He can make that
Could
case.
you imagine if he had gotten Ayuk or Chase Claypool or somebody
Or
like
Justin
that
Jefferson.
instead of Jordan Love?
Oh, man.
Jefferson
Yeah.
I think was off the board by then, right? Jefferson and Rager I think. were off.
Jefferson was like 21, so yeah, that would have been before the Packers.
I
picked.
think. Well, no, you know what? Ayuk might have been gone too, but Claypool was a second round pick.
Yes.
Yeah. They
It
could've
was
got him.
there was a whole article about how I forget the team, but there was a team that had like a whole bunch of locker room issues because of them not drafting Jefferson and passing him up for someone. The Eagles. It was the Eagles.
Yeah, the Eagles.
Because they took Rager after Jefferson,
Yeah.
and then the whole locker room there was
right before.
or before him. Sorry. So there was a
Right
whole
before.
there was a whole article about like all these players who were speaking out and like this turmoil that happened in the locker room because of Justin Jefferson when Jefferson didn't do anything to
Yeah,
start
he had
any
nothing
of
to do
that.
with it.
They're just they started.
And that's a wonderful.
I feel bad about Jalen because he's a good receiver too, but Jefferson's blowing up.
Yeah. So a wonderful digression on the Packers and the Eagles, but we're talking about the Bills at the moment.
Sorry. I got a little sidetracked.
No, I led us there. Stephon Diggs, he's been lighting it up. He leads the league in receptions. He has 46 receptions in the last 5 games. So Denver is
Not as
giving
good as Brandon Ayuk.
up, nobody's as good as Brandon Ayuk that we're going to talk about. Denver's given up and by the way, the Packers could have gotten any wide receiver at all, anywhere, and it would have been an improvement.
Yes.
Anyways, the Broncos are giving up the 8th fewest points to opposing wide receivers. They have not given up a 20-point game all season. Diggs is ranked far too highly to sit him, and with all the cornerbacks out, you have to keep him in. I'm looking also at Cole Beasley. So last week was the first game where Beasley had at least 10 targets and did not turn that into a big game. I don't expect Allen to go to him quite so much because the Broncos give up a lot of rushing yards to opposing quarterbacks, and they're going to be able to go down the field a little bit more rather than have to hit the shorter passes. So I think you sit Beasley this week. Anybody else behind me on that?
Well, Beasley has had some games that have been less than stellar, and by that I mean like 4 or 5 points. But he's had a lot of huge games too, and we've talked about him at length. So
Low
far
floor,
this
high
year.
ceiling.
And
Yeah.
so to say that this could be a floor game for Beasley, that's a tough sell based on his recent performance. But I don't see anything pointing to the fact that it's going to be a huge game for him either. So I'll go with you on that. I think that where if I'm looking at where I have Beasley at the moment.
Yeah, I just think that with the lack of cornerbacks, they're going to be throwing the ball down the field more, and Josh Allen is going to run it a little bit more.
I have to have him at 27 right now in half PPR, which is actually on par with the ECR. Normally it is not where my picks are.
Yeah.
But that puts him pretty squarely in like the wide receiver 3/flex territory.
Yeah.
And I could see if you feeling like that he's a sit this week, to take a word from Shawn, which I hate using. Perhaps he's due for a lower
A regression.
a lower game.
Let's buzz all the
regression.
words.
Yeah, I mean, we can't.
One
Go ahead.
One thing to keep in mind with them is they did just designate John Brown to return. From
Yeah,
the
he's coming
IR.
back. That's right.
So
They did.
if Brown by some chance suits up this week, certainly you would downgrade Beasley a little bit. You would downgrade Gabriel Davis a lot because he's not really consistently usable if Brown is healthy. But if Brown is out against this defense, Beasley I think is probably good for 50+ yards and a handful of catches, as he typically is.
You gotta love that little guy.
That's still like generally going to be below 10 points. And I feel like you need upside guys more. I would almost rather go with a Gabriel Davis this week, assuming no John Brown. Davis is only owned in 29% of leagues on Flea Flicker, so you got a chance at grabbing him. He is a long shot in DFS, but he's scored a touchdown 3 weeks in a row now. Only 3 catches in each of those games, but Allen is looking his way. And with a banged up secondary, I think that Davis can help exploit that. And then the rest of the team, Zach Moss, Devin Singletary, any of the tight ends you care to mention. None of them can be relied upon in fantasy football semifinals. If you were starting them, then you're not, you're not in the playoffs anymore.
Okay.
I think in deeper leagues, Moss is actually not a terrible option this week. The Broncos are tied for allowing the 4th most rushing touchdowns.
He doesn't have a lot of touches game over game, but he's had a couple games where he's had touchdowns, multiple touchdowns even. So it's definitely a possibility.
And after he was benched against the 49ers after fumbling early in that game. I think the fumble was actually credited to Josh Allen, but it was a Moss fumble early in the game. And he sat the rest of the day, but then they went right back last week, and he was right back to playing almost 60% of the snaps. And he is the guy who is on the field at the goal line, not Devin Singletary. Of course, Josh Allen could very well run those in himself, and he does sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think there's a very solid chance that Moss finds the end zone in this game against a Denver team that is going to be searching for answers on defense without their defensive backs healthy, and they're already bad against the run to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll look at the other side. We got Drew Lock, who was last week's leading passer by passer rating. He threw 4 touchdowns. He had a 149 passer rating. His best game as a pro. Excuse me. Locke is ranked 22 this week, according to Dave's rankings. However, I like him in 2 quarterback leagues. The Bills are giving up the 8th most points to opposing quarterbacks. I expect a strong follow-up game from Locke. So if you've got him in a 2 quarterback league, I think that he would be a strong start this week. They're going to need a lot of offense to keep up with the Bills. That means throwing the ball. Melvin Gordon, Phillip Lindsay. You've got both these guys are splitting carries way too much. Gordon is between 11 and 15 the last 5 weeks. Phillip Lindsay averages 12 and a half carries per game the last 4 weeks. But Phillip Lindsay has a terrible per carry average, and that's the problem. So they're in a really much a split situation. Yeah. I can't rely on either of them. They're not getting receptions either. Lindsay, for sure, you're sitting him. Gordon, I would recommend as a sit, but if you've got limited options, then I can understand why you would want to start him.
I could see that. I think Melvin Gordon will still be a strong play during that game, and you are completely correct. I would put him
completely correct, Jason.
Completely
100%. 100%.
I like hearing that. Tell me again how correct I am.
100.
100% correct. The volume that's going to go to him is going to be massive because they're going to be down by 21 points. Maybe in the first quarter, so we'll see how it all works out. Especially with as Shawn had mentioned, the 3 cornerbacks of Denver being out, and nobody else. They can't punch the ball in, so it's going to be passing touchdowns. So that's what you get.
Yep. You got Noah Fant. He was a surprise sit last week because he had an illness, so you want to pay attention to his status. It's not cramps. It's only cramps. It's only cramps, you guys.
It's not cramps or poops.
So the Bills are giving up the 6th most points to opposing tight ends, including 10-plus point games to Hunter Henry and Jordan Reed in the last couple weeks. So pay attention to Fant. If he practices and he is active, both of those things need to be true. Then he will have a decent start. You're only going to be worried about him if you're streaming tight ends all season long.
I actually have a question for the pros here, and I'm the amateur. I do have Fant, and I have Gronk. Who do you start, guys?
Oh, interesting.
Can we go one by one? Can we go one by one, though? I want to hear the
each
reasoning.
of us pick?
Yes.
Fant versus Gronk.
Well, the first thing I always do when people ask me these questions, I go to Dave's rankings as a reference point, okay?
Well, I mean, they're usually right. I would say a lot.
Well, I appreciate that.
A lot of the time.
So Gronk is playing Atlanta this week. And Atlanta gives up a lot of.
I'll just say that Gronkowski has done a lot better this year than Fant has, and they're both healthy right now, and so I would play Gronkowski.
Yeah, I think I would go with Gronkowski as well. Just I mean, Noah Fant, I'm sort of throwing out there as a streaming option for those of us who don't have a Gronk or a Waller or a Kelsey or any of those guys who you are starting every single week.
I mean, it is pretty great. You can look at the opposing team and see that they're like, what is it, the fifth worst tight end defense overall. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
You want to play those guys. You want to play those matchups. But Gronkowski has way more points than Fant has, and he scored more touchdowns, and it's just historically this season and before that, and it's a better play.
If you have to make a choice, go with the one who has a bromance with his quarterback.
That's right.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
there we go.
They have commercials. They have commercials together. That's all that matters.
And then to close, oh, sorry, Sean, go ahead.
Sean.
I was gonna say, just to chime in, I think if Fant is healthy and is active, he is a safer play than Gronkowski.
Oh.
Gronkowski has 1 or 2 catches in 4 of his last 5 games.
Ooh.
So you need a touchdown to feel good about him, whereas Fant typically has at least 3 catches every single time that he's healthy and plays. And like you mentioned, the Bills give up the 5th most tight end points per game. Jason, you mentioned Fant as a guy you're only concerned with if you're streaming tight ends. I don't know if you've seen outside of the top 5 tight ends what it looks like. Fant is a top 10 tight end all year.
Oh, my point is almost everyone is streaming tight ends this year.
But Fant is a guy that if you had him, you've probably held on to him because he's at least one of the handful of guys probably in the same tier.
Oh, sure. But you're
TJ Hawkinson, or there's a few guys that have been at least semi-consistent. You know what I mean? And he's a guy, Gesicki, where you've probably held on to him because there probably isn't better options on the waiver wire unless you want to roll the dice on a Cole Kmet or, guys like that as they kind of get opportunities.
Keep on throwing those
a Fant you're probably holding on to even though you're streaming. So you're picking up a second guy occasionally. And then just to close out this matchup, you have the wide receivers. Tim Patrick ranked 33, Jerry Jeudy ranked 44, KJ Hamler ranked 58. All of them are candidates to score on any given week. None of them have settled into a dominant role on the team, so none of them can be counted on to produce week after week. I do not think any of them are ranked high enough to be an automatic start. Tim Patrick as a WR4 is the only one you may be looking at, and boy, like that would be the very last player on your team if you're still in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So maybe he's the best player available of the rest, but probably not. Probably you've got somebody stronger on your bench. So I do think that Drew Lock will have a strong game in the passing game, but that's going to be because he has many options and not any one of them as like a dominant one, which is sort of a strength if you think about it, because then the Bills can't focus in and shut down just one guy.
It's true.
Because it's not like they're taking away too much when they shut down one guy.
Yeah. We have a question in the chat room. It's a lineup question, and this is from SDG Talk. So thank you for the question, bro. And a bunch of garbage players he says he has for one flex spot.
Is this like the lineup that we got a couple weeks ago that was like the greatest lineup we've ever seen?
That's a different guy.
Okay.
So Rashad Perryman, James White, Jacoby Myers, Le'Veon Bell, Russell Gage, or DeAndre Washington. And I'll say this. I'm glad you left the best for last. Though you may not think that guys like Gage and Washington are really good, they actually are a pretty interesting plays for this particular week. So I like Gage. It's a good segue to my next thing I'm going to talk about with the Atlanta Falcons matchup. I'm going to pick Gage for that 100% because Julio Jones is not going to play this week, and there's a one particular corner who's going to shadow Calvin Ridley that even though he may get a lot of targets in the game, he's probably not going to have a great game because of that. And I think Matt Ryan's gonna target Gage a lot because of that shadow corner. So I'm gonna go with him. I would say Washington's my number 2, and then after that maybe Perriman. So what do you guys think? Again, that's Brashad Perriman, James White, Jacoby Myers, Le'Veon Bell, Russell Gage, and DeAndre Washington, all of who are competing for one flex spot on SDG's team.
So I don't know that DeAndre Washington is going. Oh no, wait, that's in Miami now, right?
He's at Miami.
I'm thrown off with the old Raiders thing.
His status depends on whether or not Gaskin or Ahmed play this week.
Yeah, I was thinking all about the Josh Jacobs tweeting that he wasn't going to play, but then he did play, sort of thing. We don't have to worry about that. I think number 1 on this list is Russell Gage for me.
Oh, and he's that same guy. So I guess it is the guy who had a crazy lineup.
Uh-huh.
But you know what? Even people with crazy lineups still have horrible flex position decisions to make.
Sure. I mean, sometimes you start Tim Patrick.
Sometimes I never start Tim Patrick. That's a never start for me.
Okay.
I mean, Tim Patrick is the wide receiver 1 in that offense.
Oh my God, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, but he's the wide receiver 3 in a lot of offenses.
I would have taken him last week.
You would have hit last week.
You're right.
Okay.
You're right.
You're okay.
You're right. You can bet black every time you're playing roulette. Doesn't mean you're going to win.
You're going to
So
win 48% of the time.
Remind me of the list again. So it's DeAndre Washington,
Brashad Perriman,
Rashad
James
Perriman.
White, Jacoby Myers, Le'Veon Bell, Russell Gage, and DeAndre Washington.
Boom.
I agree with Russell Gage myself. I mean, it's just matchup.
Just say Gage. Just say Gage.
I can't support
Sean.
any of the Patriots with the way Cam Newton's been throwing the ball.
We can give him the 4.
And I cannot support a New York Jet
Majority
to
rule.
do anything.
Yeah,
What?
Well, Perriman is probably going to be shadowed by Jalen Ramsey. I mean, that
It'll be
cross him off the list. The only guy in
because
that
Jalen
offense
Ramsey has
that's a
nothing better to
receiver-
do this week.
Yeah.
Honestly, with the guys he
He's gonna
just
be-
listed, I might be looking at the waiver wire to see what's available.
The
Because the Bucks, you mentioned Carlton Davis is the corner you're referring to in Tampa, but he's been dicier in recent weeks. He's the guy who gave up 200 yards to Tyreek Hill.
Yes,
in the
but
first
that's
quarter.
maybe the. I'll get to this in a second. I'm talking about that matchup, so I'll address that. But that was the one thing that is sort of made him dicey. Other than that, I mean, if you look at what he just did against Jefferson and Thielen, he only allowed 5 total yards on 4 targets when he was covering them. So
If you watch that game, Kirk Cousins was under fire on almost every snap. The pressure is what has made that defense so effective that the quarterbacks have to get rid of the ball quicker than they want to. It's more that than that his coverage has been spectacular.
Look,
He's been
we
good.
can get into a lot of inception here, but I mean the point
Sure,
is
sure.
he still is a shadow corner, and Ridley's going to still get targets, but it's not Ridley who we're talking about, right?
No.
It's that Gage would be the number 2 receiver on a team that's going to have to throw the ball.
But is Gage going to play on the outside? Is he going to play in the slot? I think it'll be because I think Olamide Zacchaeus, is he healthy? I don't even know at this point if he's healthy or not. The Falcons have had kind of a mess of guys after Julio and Ridley that have played.
I'm not sure.
I think all of these guys are all pretty dicey. Gage is probably the best one.
He did it. He said Gage. All right.
He said
good work.
Gage.
But I would be scouring the waiver wire for see if Lynn Bowden is available. That's what I would do.
No, that's a good
Check
point.
if Lynn Bowden is out there.
That's a good point.
Maybe a Gabriel Davis.
If Lynn Bowden is available, play Lynn Bowden. He's going to have at least a decent game, especially in a PPR league, which you didn't say if it was or not, but I assume that most leagues are at this point.
I mean, I'm sure he may have been picked up on waivers at this point, but Jeff Wilson Jr. against the Cowboys is another one for a flex spot that would be more valuable than any of those
after
guys.
everyone is talking about Mostert, and here we are. You know, it's Jeff Wilson instead. So
Wilson hasn't been better than Mostert when they've played. Like Mostert has played better, but Mostert's injury, if it holds him out, Wilson's going to have a big game against.
So let's move on to the Atlanta Falcons matchup, and that's versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Sunday at noon. And again, the Atlanta wide receivers Jones, Ridley, and Gage. Jones is likely out for this matchup based on the latest injury update that he's week to week per interim coach Raheem Morris. Hey, Julio Jones fan, I'm very sorry.
I got him on a team that's in the playoffs. It's very sad.
Well, you're not playing Julio Jones.
No, I'm playing
saying.
Cole Beasley, who I just told everyone not to play.
So Ridley,
He's the best of the rest.
Ridley and Gage queued up for an interesting matchup against the Bucks passing defense. Bucks passing defense allowing the 12th most points to wide receivers at 24.4 fantasy points per game, which certainly sounds good on paper. But again, the Bucks cornerback Carlton Davis I like. Sean was able to bring up some points that are very valid, but he still is a shadow corner to the point where people have been affected negatively in most situations when he's guarding them. And I think that's going to affect Ridley's performance negatively. Now, will it make you stop playing Ridley? Probably not, because if it moves Ridley from a WR1 to a WR2, you're still playing him in your starting lineup. But Russell Gage, I think it does help, because I think Matt Ryan is more likely to target the ball towards parts of the field in which Carlton Davis is not.
Is not.
And that's all I'm saying.
Very succinctly put.
So, temper expectations and expect Gage to have another plus game. He did have 5 receptions on 7 targets for 82 yards, and he threw a 39-yard touchdown to Ridley last week. So
Calvin Ridley has the 4th most points per game in the league.
Some of them from Russell Gage.
Oh, that's right, because Russell Gage threw it to Ridley.
So let's talk running backs now, with Gurley combining for just 9 points in PPR over the last 3 games and giving a lot of work to Ito Smith. Let's just agree not to play any of these guys in this particular matchup. Are you guys okay with that?
I agree.
And probably through the end of the year, I'm not sure, unless your team is morbidly dying and bleeding out in some horrible.
If we were doing the cut list, I
horrible
think that
way.
Todd Gurley would be on it.
Do not play Atlanta Falcons
That's
running
fine.
backs. Please do not do this.
It's honestly, it's surprising. I'd say Ito has probably looked like the best one of the group in recent weeks, but
I'd agree with that,
don't
Shawn.
play
Yeah.
any of them.
No, don't play any. But if you're going to play one, play Ito.
But don't play any of them.
But don't do that.
By the way, the Bucks have only allowed one rushing touchdown since Week 9, so it's not likely that changes.
Don't play any of them.
But if you're going to play one, don't play any of them. as far as the Bucks,
Play Lynn Bowden.
let's talk running backs. The Falcons are allowing the fourth least amount of fantasy points to running backs at 14.6 per game. And it certainly won't be Ronald Jones leading the offense on the ground, since he just had surgery on his broken pinky finger, and earlier today, this afternoon, was added to the COVID-19 list. So
good times.
it's not likely that Ronald Jones is going to be out there.
How very
on Sunday.
2020 of that.
Between Leonard Fournette and Keyshawn Vaughn on the bench, there are no good options, and it will take a miracle for any of them to give you decent fantasy production. So can we just say altogether, let's not play any running backs in this matchup?
Fair enough.
All right.
I agree with that.
And
I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, someone for Tampa is going to catch a handful of passes. I think McCoy is probably the best bet if you had to play one, because just last week.
Yeah, but that's impossible to decide on.
Fantasy
Yeah,
playoffs here. You better not have.
There's a
LaShawn
difference between
McCoy.
just picking a guy and having a guy versus the entire league, where you have to, have a comparative
Well,
value.
we can certainly agree that there'll be someone that has value at the position. I don't know that we can discern who
give
that
up
is.
a lot of receptions to the running back position. I would say for DFS purposes, McCoy could be an interesting cheap play at the position. Because Vaughn last week, Fournette wasn't active and Vaughn didn't play much at all. McCoy is the guy who I would expect to catch passes. But Fournette caught, 100 balls last year? Had 100 targets, I should say, last year. So he or McCoy could have a better day than we expect. But you're right. Season-long leagues, playoffs, you probably don't want to play either one. But I think when you get into DFS, there's some sneaky upside for both of those guys.
I think that's a good point, Shawn.
They don't really throw the ball a lot to running backs on that team, though.
He's saying in this particular position, maybe they would. And a DFS play is different from trying to play somebody on your league.
Tom Brady in years past has had high volume.
He absolutely has, but he doesn't even have anybody at the running back position averaging 3 receptions per game this year.
But they've also cycled through running backs. There have been games where Fournette was the guy. There have been games where it's Ronald Jones. I mean, they haven't had a real consistent.
Well, it's not possible for us to choose one at this point.
I think it's more of a Bruce Arians offense kind of thing.
Sure. With New England, he always had that designated. This is the receiving back in this offense. Usually James White, but before that, Dion Lewis.
Oh, he would definitely benefit from that. Brady is amazing at the little touch pass, screen pass sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's not really part of their game in Tampa. Maybe they need to add it.
Well, Arians is more of a vertical passing game kind of offensive mind, for sure.
Well, I appreciate the insight, and it is maybe a good guy for DFS. DFS. DFS? Oofda. That's DFS. As you're saying. Let's move on to wide receivers for Tampa Bay. I have Chris Godwin as the number 20 wide receiver in half PPR, and Evans as the number 23. Very close. With Antonio Brown and Scotty Miller also sucking up some targets, getting some touchdowns, it's becoming a little bit unpredictable what's going to happen in that particular offense. As we're talking about with the running backs, with everyone really there, with Tom Brady and Bruce Arians, and they don't seem like they're really getting along very well, which is a theme with Tom Brady, by the way. Doesn't seem to be getting along with anybody over a long period of time except for Antonio Brown, who he often shares his house with for some strange reason. And this is going to come out 5 years from now in some kind of weird documentary, I'm sure.
About how you shouldn't allow Antonio Brown near your kids.
No, this weird love affair between Antonio Brown and Tom Brady is going to come out. It's going to be great.
Good for those kids.
Good for them.
Those crazy kids.
Anyway, they're both clearly WR2s this week, whether or not they're drinking the TB12 water. And
they definitely drink the TB12 water.
I like Godwin this week personally, since Brady has been having some trouble tossing the deep ball. And Godwin is finally healthy after having some issues related to the surgery on his finger. I know that hasn't prevented him from playing, as it didn't last week, but I still think that there's just been some lingering trust issues, And we all know that Tom Brady really needs to trust you. Maybe Chris Godwin didn't do the trust fall, and that's why the past couple weeks he hasn't been getting the
Chris
points.
Godwin needs some tips from Antonio Brown.
But I think I think the point here in this matchup, right, is that they are 20 and 23, Godwin and Evans, and they preseason were probably both within like the top 8 receivers of all the receivers in the NFL. So even though Tom Brady has done a decent job himself when we look at his statistics as an average, he really came in here and didn't make the wide receivers any better as far as fantasy production. He just made them.
I would argue that he made them worse.
He made them worse, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's an unfortunate set of circumstances.
Jameis Winston may throw the ball to the other team, but he threw it to his own team an awful lot as well.
That's true.
Well, it
I
also
think
could
if
be the
you-
Bruce Arians offense too.
Well, it was Bruce Arians last year.
Oh,
Here's
when
the
he was
thing,
in
I
New
think-
England.
No, I'm just talking about Jameis.
Oh,
Shawn,
yeah.
what's your perspective?
Here's my kind of the chime in on this is if you looked at what the two receivers did last year and said, okay, we're adding Tom Brady, he's even better, they're going to be better. You're overlooking the fact that Jameis threw for 5,000 yards last year.
Of course.
That's not a normal season.
Of course.
And there was going to be regression because Brady wasn't going to throw, because they're going to be in the lead more often with Brady rather than Jameis. They're going to be throwing, at the very least, at least a little bit less. They're not going to throw for 5,000 yards, which means those receivers' numbers are going to come down. And I think people who went into this year treating it like they were going to be as good as they were a year ago probably were going to be disappointed with the production they got from them. I think I have Mike Evans in one league and Godwin in none. Just because I wasn't going to reach for those guys, ahead of, or I wasn't going to reach for them where most people were going to.
Yeah.
And Evans has been the touchdown guy. It's kind of interesting with the two of them because Godwin is the guy in PPR because he's going to be more consistently targeted. But Evans is, I don't know the exact numbers, but I guarantee Evans has more touchdowns than Godwin.
I mean, I think
I
think you're right. And when they brought in Antonio Brown, that didn't help Godwin any because they're both playing similar roles. So that's not very helpful to the whole thing. But I think your points is well
right.
taken.
But
there.
I think Brown more took targets away from Scotty Miller and from Tyler Johnson and the ancillary guys down the depth chart more so than from Godwin and from Mike Evans. I think that's who he affected more. And perhaps Gronkowski, who's, again, 1 or 2 catches in 4 of the last 5 games.
Yeah.
So what else you got on this game, Dave?
Nothing. So I'm wrapping that up.
Okay, we got another question from the chat room. We need to pick one running back here. We got Adrian Peterson, DeAndre Washington, or Bowden Jr., who I suppose was probably just added to the roster in the last few minutes since the last question.
So I like Lynn Bowden Jr. Over both of those guys. And
so I've heard it all night long. What is the correct pronunciation of his name?
Well, ask Shawn. I mean, where did he go to college?
Yeah, where
Shawn?
did he go to college, Shawn?
He went to Kentucky, I believe.
And how do you pronounce his last name? Do you know?
I think it's Bowden, but I've heard it both Bowden and Bowden. I think I've said it both ways on this.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I
me
think I
too.
said both ways.
Bowden.
We'll have to go back to the tapes. We'll have to.
Louisiana.
Yeah.
I might be able to find a proper pronunciation. Give me 1 second.
But he
here and
says
see what it...
he says not PPR, and that's an interesting distinction. So if I look at my particular rankings, for example, then I'm going to have DeAndre Washington probably tops out of those guys if it's not PPR, because
I
he's going to.
disagree.
Well, he's going to have the clearest target path to actual touches for yards, in my opinion.
I disagree. I think that, Washington last week had 52 yards from scrimmage. I don't know that. I think Bowden or however you want to say it is probably going to have more than 50. I think he'll probably outproduce Washington in yards. You're counting on a touchdown from Washington, and you're also counting on Gaskin and Ahmed both being out again, which is not a sure thing.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Right?
You're 100% right, but you also have to remember that that Lynn Bowden or Bowden.
So I have a pronunciation from The Athletic, which is a fine publication, but it's
Sure.
literally BOW-DIN, which is no help at all.
Is he from Louisiana?
Well, it doesn't
No, he went
doesn't
to
specify if it's
Kentucky.
bow
That's where
or
he went
bow.
to school.
Well, that
We use the
in the way
water
that
boy.
they put it.
that
We
that
use the
shows
water
that
boy
it's
as
that shows
one.
that it's din and not den. So it's probably
Bowden.
Bowden. Because
It could be
Bowden.
Bowden, Bowden. It's the same ending.
I like
What
this. This
Bobby
is
It's Bobby
Bowden?
Boucher.
well,
Is
this
it
is
Bobby Boucher
this
or
is
Bobby
actually
Bowden?
called the Fantasy Phonetic Finish Line podcast, and we're happy to have you guys on. But
Sorry.
So I do have one more question.
just
It's not
researching
from
how
within
to
your
say
chat.
that.
A
Okay.
question that somebody offline asked me, and I'd love to get the group opinion on it.
ooh, offline.
Same idea here.
That's a word I haven't heard since like the 90s.
All right, so it's start one of the following three guys in full PPR. It's amazing that one of these guys is included with the other two, given what their names are. But given the way the season's gone, it's not crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's Ezekiel Elliott, Josh Jacobs, and Wayne Gallman.
Jesus.
So
you got
do we have
Zeke
our
against
matchups
San
here?
Francisco.
Okay.
That's not hard for me. I start Jacobs if Jacobs is playing and healthy.
Josh Jacobs against the Chargers.
100%.
And then Gallman, let me see, the Giants are against the Browns.
But Ezekiel is dead last for me in that lineup.
Yeah,
Wow.
I got to agree.
Zeke is
Zeke
dead
at the
last.
bottom of the PPR list is wild to
You
me.
just wanted to see Zeke at the bottom, is what you
Zeke
wanted.
is dead to me
No.
this year.
Somebody legitimately asked me that. I haven't answered him yet, and I would love to, let's round table it and let's see what people think.
Yeah.
Zeke's dead.
Long live Zeke.
I mean, as somebody who has Tony Pollard in Dynasty, I'm okay with that.
$80 million. Is it $80 million?
Well, it's tough. I mean, Gallman's still the starting running back there, but the Giants are a team
We're
that
gonna have Colt McCoy this week again, right?
yeah, they're a team that's just not going to do very well in general. And
But he is fantasy average to decent every week.
he's no Kyle Orton, that Colt McCoy.
Few backups are.
You're
Dave.
right. Losing Daniel Jones
Coward.
probably means they run the ball more because did McCoy start the game against Seattle or was that Jones?
I'm not sure.
No, that was Jones.
Okay, I was gonna say because Gallman was about the only guy who's run for over 100 yards against Seattle in months.
Well, that's just because Seattle gives up so much in the passing game that nobody needs to run against them.
Interesting fact about the Seahawks: they haven't given up a receiver touchdown since week 8.
Wow.
Well, I have to go with Jacobs because, in my opinion, he's still that same RB1, even if he's very borderline now. And the Raiders' offense, it may not be what it was earlier this year when we flipped a quarter into the wishing well, or at least our friend Tad did. And it worked for a little while, but it doesn't work for the whole season, Tad. You got to put more than 25 cents in there. So we're looking.
It's only good for one Chiefs win.
That's right. So, but we're still looking, I think, at Josh Jacobs, unless you guys think differently.
No, I am in agreement. That was my instinct when I saw the question.
Not
was
Ezekiel
Jacobs.
Elliott
Jacobs
is the
guy,
answer.
yeah.
Not
Especially-
Ezekiel.
Especially against the Chargers. If we know that Jacobs is healthy, it has to be Jacobs. He's going to get the ball a bunch.
Yeah.
The Raiders need to do whatever they can to keep keep Justin Herbert off the field and keep their defense off the field.
Yeah.
All right.
But we got to close up the show. So why don't we wrap up, Jason? Give us some closing thoughts.
Yeah, well, I just want to thank you, Shawn, for coming on with us and sharing your rookie wisdom. Make sure that everybody goes and checks out. Shawn's got 2 more rookie reports that he's gonna he owes us for the rest of the season, and then we'll release him from his contract.
Probably 3 of them.
Oh, I like that. A little roundup, maybe.
Nice.
I love to throw in some DFS fun for week 17.
For week 17?
And for the
If you know-
record,
And you know what?
If
A
you
lot
know
of
who
rookies
has
are going to
something
get
to play
action
for.
that week too.
yeah, for those of you that are still hanging out here because you have teams in the playoffs, etc., you're in dynasty leagues or whatever, we'll definitely be doing some shows in the preseason and before, during, and after the rookie draft, which is the real meat and potatoes of those kinds of leagues, and it's a lot of fun.
So
And I always enjoy week 17 where you have to kind of decipher who has something to play for. Who's
Oh my
gonna do
God,
what.
that week is crazy.
I've won
You could just flip a coin,
decent
too.
amount. I mean, I've probably made 5 times my investment in DFS in week 17, 2 or 3 years running, just because it's. I mean, it's you just have to know who has something to play for.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. I look forward to your tips for that. Maybe I'll jump in on that this week. So apparently, our guy SDG Talks says it's Bowden. Bowdun.
Well, It remains to be seen.
We'll figure this out next week. We
From
do know,
Louisiana.
however, that
From
it's
Louisiana.
Tua Tagovailoa.
Well, we know it's Tagovailoa.
Tua Tagovailoa.
Although every single announcer calls him
I said Tagovailoa when I was talking quarterbacks. I know it's
You
spelled
did.
Tagovailoa, but it's pronounced with like an N that's not there.
Oh,
well,
yeah,
there's just nothing but
Tagovailoa.
difficult Dolphins this year.
Well, but all the announcers are still
Savon
calling him
Ahmed.
Tagovailoa.
Savon Ahmed.
Tagovailoa, and adding in an extra A for no reason. And
Oh,
but
yeah, that's too much. That's not necessary.
he says that's too much.
Salva.
Don't
Noah
add the
is
A. Don't add
monogamy.
the A. All right, come on.
Noah
We're finished
is
with the
monogamy.
phonetics.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us this week. We will figure out how to pronounce Mr. Lynn's last name next week for you. And let's just hope he has a good fantasy game.
Mr. Lynn.
And is worth talking about.
I don't know if this is like a
Ridiculous.
weird Jackie Chan movie from the 70s.
So make sure that you go to the website later in the week and check out Dave's updated rankings, the rookie report. Follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Instagram at drinkfive in both places. And we will see everyone next Wednesday night.
All right, how about one more cheers?
We won't see you, but you'll see us.
So, thank you, Glenn, for joining us. Thank you, Jason.
Oh,
as
I
always.
forgot to thank you, Glenn. I'm so sorry. Thank you so
Oh
much.
no.
Thank you, Shawn.
No, thank you for having. I
Thanks
love
for
doing
inviting
this.
us.
By the way, I'm drinking now a. I didn't say it at the end. I just poured it. A wild onion steak pump.
Nice. Well, good night. Good night, guys. Good night, Shawn. Good night, everybody.